Hello and welcome to the Protoss edition of the Basic Units and Structures Guide. Today we are going to be going over the Protoss units and structures. To start things off, the main Protoss building is the Nexus. From the Nexus you can build probes, which are the Protoss workers. Now, all Protoss units have an HP bar, which is the green bar, and shields, which is the blue. Shields regenerate, whereas the HP does not. So, I'm going to damage that Nexus just a little bit. We can see it has 980 shields, but it's going to start regenerating. And just like that, it is back to full. So the first building we want to talk about is the pylon. This serves as the Protoss supply structure, and you can see this glowing blue field around it. And that's significant because all Protoss buildings, aside from the Nexus, must be built within the power field. The next structure we want to talk about is the gateway, and this is the basic Protoss production facility. And from here you can build your basic Protoss units, such as the Zealot. The Zealot does 8 damage for 2 attacks, so it is a pretty powerful melee unit. It does need to get up close to its target. As you can see, it slashes 2 times, each time for 8 damage, and that's why this probe took 16 damage. That's some quick maths for you. The next unit of the gateway is the Sentry. The Sentry is the Protoss's first spellcaster unit. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage by itself. It only does 6. And its attack kind of a little tickle beam, but its use lies in its abilities. For example, Force Field, which produces this barrier where units cannot go through, so the Zealot has to take the long way around. So if a Protoss has multiple sentries, they can cast multiple force fields, they can trap units, cut off retreats. A very useful ability to have. The next ability in the Sentry's arsenal is the Guardian Shield ability. This creates, like it sounds, a shield which reduces incoming ranged damage to friendly units by 2. So I'll be able to show you in a second when this energy generates, but this reduces damage from ranged attacks, such as marines, roaches, hydras, anything that shoots. And that's what it looks like. You get this orb, this ball, and it protects anything within it just a little bit. Very useful ability if you're going up against Terran Bio or Hydras from the Zerg. And the last ability in the Sentry's arsenal is Hallucination. This allows the Sentry to create a fake unit. You can use this to scare your opponent. You can use this to create an air unit for scouting. And you can see everything that you can hallucinate here. Pretty much everything in the Protoss arsenal, save for a couple things. Most of the time you will see Protosses spend this on a Phoenix, which we will go over later. However, you will sometimes see Protosses use it to hallucinate big scary units to make their opponent think they're going for some kind of technology that they are not going for. Now the next unit out of the gateway is going to be the Stalker. This is a ranged unit. It does 13 damage or 18 versus armored. It attacks pretty slowly, but it is a very solid all-around unit in the Protoss arsenal. And the next unit is the Adept. The Adept has an interesting ability which allows it to cast this shade, and when this timer runs out, the Adept will teleport to the location of the shade, just like that. So, you'll often see Protosses use this ability to scout as well as to shade into places where they shouldn't be, and then suddenly you'll have a bunch of Adepts in your mineral line. And they do pretty decent damage, 10 damage and 22 versus light. So very effective in harassing workers such as probes.
Give us your command.
We can see it. One shot like that does a lot of damage to this poor probe.
Let your will be heard.
That covers the basic gateway units. Now let's move on to the next structure. I should have noted that these three units, the Sentry, Adept, and Stalker, requires a Cybernetics core in order to be built. And the Cybernetics core also enables the Protoss to build a Stargate, which allows them to make Phoenixes, which I touched upon before, but this is an air-to-air unit. They move very quickly. They do decent damage, and the general strategy would be to have a few of these. So they fly around, they do good damage against air units, and they have this one special ability, Graviton Beam, which lifts off an enemy unit into the air, and this will allow them to attack units they otherwise wouldn't be able to attack. Like so.
I will comply. I soar to victory. La Farosh.
The next air unit that the Stargate can produce is an Oracle. The Oracle is the next spellcaster that Protoss have. It doesn't have any attacks of its own, but its abilities make up for that. For example, the Pulsar Beam, which you activate and it does a lot of damage to ground units, like so. You can see it beaming down this Stalker pretty quickly. The next ability is Revelation. This allows the Protoss to cast this wide area to reveal anything in that area. It grants vision temporarily for 20 seconds.
You seek guidance? We interpret. I see.
So let's turn off vision for now.
Our window is short.
And if you cast it on this enemy building, you can see that little icon, which means the Protoss can see it right now.
How can I aid you?
And the final ability is Stasis Ward. It produces this little trap that is invisible unless the enemy has detection, and when an enemy unit walks into it, they will set it off, and anything in this area will have been frozen.
Bad news? Big
Now,
job,
once
huh?
a unit is frozen, they cannot be attacked, they cannot move,
What's going
so they
on?
are effectively out of the game for the duration of this stasis. And this is a good ability to freeze your enemy's workers, to
I'm going.
inhibit their mining for a period of time, or you can use it to trap part of their army. So you can freeze, let's say, half of their army, and then you can fight the other half with an advantage.
An omen. Na-Zuk-Tai.
The next Stargate unit is the Void Ray. The Void Ray
It shall be done.
does 6 damage and 10 damage versus armored, but it attacks very quickly.
Undercool.
So it's this continuous beam, and you can see it does pretty fast damage. 10 damage every few milliseconds.
Phase
And
crystals charged.
the Void Ray also has the Prismatic Alignment ability, which causes the Void Ray to gain +6 damage versus armored units at the cost of a little bit of movement speed.
Calibrate.
So right now its movement speed is 3.85. If we were to activate this, it receives a
Annihilation
penalty,
commencing.
but its damage, as you can see, gets that +6. So it's going to do some extra damage to this Nexus now. And of course, you can cancel it early
This vessel
if you
shall
need that extra speed to get away.
Ikuda Anai.
Let us an omen.
Next structure is the robotics facility. This allows the production of observers, which is an invisible air unit. Doesn't do any damage, but it's very useful to scout. You can fly this into your opponent's base, and if they don't have detection, you pretty much get a free scout of their base. You can see everything they're doing. And as with all detectors, you can turn it into surveillance mode, which will extend its sight line. Just like that. And when it's in surveillance mode, it cannot be moved. The next robotics facility unit is the Warp Prism. This is a transport unit from the Protoss. You can load up units into there and drop them off in your opponent's space or whatever. And the pickup range for the Warp Prism is pretty far, so the unit over here, if it wanted to go into there, that's the range. It just warps into that Warp Prism. So you can see pros do some pretty nasty micro things with this. And you can also convert this into phasing mode, which immobilizes the unit. However, it allows it to have a little power field. So you can see, if you so choose, you can build units in here. But the primary function of this is to warp units in.
Research
If you
complete.
research Warp Gate from the Cybernetics core, it turns your gateways into a warp gate. And this allows you to warp in units anywhere you have power. So you can warp a zealot in this pylon field or this warp prism field.
We are the blades of iron. My life for Iowa.
Just like that. Another thing I should mention is that a normal pylon, as you can see, it has its power field is this regular dark blue, whereas this one here is a light blue, and the reason for that is because this pylon is next to a gateway. demonstrate exactly what that means. If you have a gateway and you warp into this slow blue, dark blue field, it takes quite a while for your units to warp in. However, if you warp it into this light blue field, it is significantly faster. So we see they both finished at about the same time, even though the second one started later. And if you build a pylon next to a nexus, you also get that light blue field. And again, the criteria for that is to have a warp gate near that pylon. So you can see this pylon has converted into that light blue fast warp in. The next unit out of the robotics facility is the Immortal. Now the Immortal does a lot of damage versus armored units, as you can see, 50 damage versus armored units. So let's take a look at just how quickly it dispatches this Stalker, which is an armored unit. Just like that. And the Immortal has a special ability, Barrier, which absorbs up to 100 damage, lasts for 2 seconds, and it can only occur once every 32 seconds. So the Immortal has essentially a extra shield. So we see that once it takes damage, it activates. And it's very short, but it can be useful to absorb extra damage. And then it goes on cooldown, and after 32 seconds, it can be activated once again. Now the next building we want to talk about is the Forge. The Forge contains Protoss upgrades for their ground units, ground weapons, armor, and shields. But more importantly, it allows the Protoss to build cannons, which is the defensive structure of the Protoss. It can attack both ground and air. It deals decent damage. And it is a legitimate strategy for Protoss is to go for what's known as a cannon rush. They'll start off with a forge and try to build cannons in the opponent's base. Very annoying strategy. And the next structure is the shield battery. The shield battery is a defensive structure which heals up shields, which is again that blue portion. So for example, if we were to damage this zealot a little bit, you can see this battery healing that shield right back up. The battery does have an energy bar, so it cannot heal forever. It can only heal while it has energy. But it's a very powerful defensive structure. It heals up the shields very quickly, as you just saw. And now it's a good opportunity to talk about the Nexus and its abilities. The first ability is Chrono Boost, which you cast on a structure and it causes it to research or produce 50% faster. Let's take a look at that with this upgrade.
Upgrade complete.
Oh well, that doesn't really help because it's instant, but if you cast this on, say, your Nexus, you see that bar, and that means anything it produces or researches is going to be 50% faster. I can't really demonstrate that, unfortunately, in this test map because everything is instant. But the next ability is Strategic Recall, and you can cast this on your units. This allows them to warp back to the Nexus after a short delay. So that's what it looks like. It takes a few seconds to activate, and then boom, they teleport right next to the Nexus. So it's a very useful ability if you go for an attack and you're stuck all the way across the map, you need to get out of there, you can just recall your units. And the final ability is Battery Overcharge, which overcharges a shield battery near a Nexus, increasing its shield restoration rate by 100% and allowing it to restore shields without consuming energy. So if we were to use that on this shield battery, you can see that little effect, and it's going to heal up way faster. So if all these things try to attack this immortal, it takes effectively 0 damage because it gets healed up so quickly. And now that the overcharge has expired, it was able to take some more damage, but you can see just how effective that ability is defensively. Let's move on to advanced structures. First advanced structure we want to talk about is the Twilight Council. This requires the cybernetics core to be made, but this structure contains a charge upgrade for zealots, which increases their movement speed and allows them to use their charge ability.
Research complete.
Also contains the blink upgrade, which allows stalkers to teleport to a nearby location.
Research
And it also
complete.
allows you to research the Resonating Glaives ability, which increases the attack speed of adepts by 45%.
Upgrade complete.
So let's take a look at what those look like. Zealot with its charge upgrade. Unload that. Alright. So we can see it's a little bit faster now. And the charge upgrade, if we were to use that on this poor SCV, you see it charges once it gets close enough and closing the distance. So it makes zealots a lot better because they can charge right in and deal damage. The next ability is the blink for the stalkers. This allows them to do this.
We are one with the shadows. Very well.
Let's take a look at that again. You can use this to go up to high ground. So if you have vision of your opponent's base, you can jump right in. This can be a very effective harassment tool. Once the cooldown is done, you can hop back out of there. And the final thing is the Resonating Glaives upgrade, which allows these guys to attack quicker.
Let your will be heard. We are
Hard to really see the difference, but there's also the visual upgrade. The blast is now yellow.
combat awaits.
And with the Twilight Council,
Give us your
that also allows the Protoss to create the Dark Shrine as well as the Templar Archives. The Dark Shrine allows Protoss to create Dark Templars, which is an invisible unit, very annoying unit, very powerful as well. As we can see, 50 damage with that +1 upgrade.
I will comply.
That means it one-shots enemy workers just like that.
Enough.
One slash,
By the void.
it is dead.
Research complete.
The Dark Shrine also has that blink ability,
Here is an illusion.
Shadow Stride for the Dark Templars. which is essentially Blink but for Dark Templars. Similar to the Stalker, it allows them to teleport just like that. And the Templar Archives allows Protoss to build High Templars. Now, High Templars are the final and perhaps strongest Protoss spellcaster. They do have an attack, but it's not very powerful.
We shall stand against the
But their utility is in their abilities. For example, the feedback ability, which drains all energy from the target and deals 0.5 damage per point of energy. This is a good counter to enemy spellcaster units. You can use this on I don't have any enemy units to demonstrate this on, but it's good for, let's say, medevacs or infestors, vipers, anything with energy. You can use feedback on. It wipes out the energy, does some damage as well.
Command center upgrade complete.
And the Templar Archives can also research Storm, which allows Templars to cast Storm, which is a very powerful, very devastating ability. It deals 80 damage over 3 seconds. So what does that look like? Let's group all these units up to demonstrate. And just like that, deals huge damage. And it forces your opponent to either eat that damage or they have to get out of there to avoid it. Again, very powerful ability.
We are unanimous.
And it doesn't look like I can cast this on a structure.
We shall stand against the darkness. We seek enlightenment.
Now the final thing to note of Dark Templars and High Templars is that if you have 2 of them, you can morph them into an Archon. You can do this with any combination of Dark Templars and High Templars, as long as you have 2. And Archons are very bulky, but very powerful ground units. See, they have a lot of shields, but not a lot of HP. So that's something you want to keep an eye on if you're using or going up against Archons. They deal 28 damage and 39 versus biological. So very effective against Zerg, very effective against Terran Bio. And in general, a very tanky unit. They can absorb a lot of hits, like so. But once their shields are gone, they die very quickly. So it's something to be aware of if you are a Protoss player. You can see it get healed up by that shield battery here. It's also worth noting that Archons deal splash damage, so anything it attacks it also deals damage to the units nearby. So let's take a look at that from a few of these SCVs. Group them up. And so we see that one attack dealt damage to all 3 SCVs. And again. They also attack air and ground, so very effective against units such as Mutalisks, Zerglings, pretty much anything the Zerg has. The next structure is the robotics bay. Now this allows the robotics facility to produce Colossus, which is this tall War of the Worlds kind of unit. The special thing about this unit is they can walk up cliffs, like this, and of course down, and it deals damage in a line.
SCV ready.
So if your opponent has
Man the
a
go
line
ahead.
of
What's
units
going on? Man the go ahead.
like this,
Bad news.
the Colossus can deal damage to several of them at once, just like that. By default, it has a range of 7, but you can also research Extended Thermal Lance from the Robotics Bay. This extends it
Research
to 9
complete.
range. Just like that. And the Robotics Bay also allows the robotics facility to produce disruptors. Disruptors don't have an auto attack of their own, but they have this ability, Purification Nova, which shoots out a ball that deals huge amounts of damage, 145 splash damage, and an additional 55 to shields. So it's a pretty powerful unit. It does require careful control. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So we have a group of enemy units here. Let's throw out this Purification Nova, and boom! It deals
What's going
massive
on?
damage to everything caught in its wake.
Your demands. It is known.
Now the other upgrades from the Robotics Bay are the Gravitic Boosters, which increases the movement speed of observers. So by default, observer moves at 2.62. With the upgrade,
Research complete.
it moves up to 3.94, makes them a lot faster. And the final upgrade, Gravitic Drive, which increases the movement speed of Warp Prisms. So by default, Warp Prism moves at 4.13. With the upgrade,
Research
boom,
complete.
5.36. Now the next and final structure that the Protoss has is called the Fleet Beacon. Fleet Beacon allows the Stargate to produce Tempests, which are a very annoying unit, as most units in the Protoss arsenal are. The Tempest,
Genetic matrix.
it has massive range. So as you can see, 14 range for anti-air and 10 range for anti-ground. And also worthy of note is that it does bonus damage versus massive units. Massive units, for example, like the Tempest itself.
We fear no enemy.
Now the Fleet Beacon also has an upgrade called Tectonic Destabilizers, which improves the Tempest's Resonance Coil to deal plus 40 damage versus structures.
Victory is in our grasp.
So
Throw fate
by
to the
default,
Ah,
this
you scared me.
winds. Golden Armada
Tempest,
awaits.
it does
Number one.
good amount of damage to this enemy orbital command.
Vengeance
But
is
now if we were to research this,
Upgrade
you can
complete.
see it changes to an orange and it does extra damage. So very annoying to deal with. It can
confirmed.
burst down enemy structures pretty quickly if you have a few of these,
Golden Armada
and
awaits.
it's also very powerful against
Throw
enemy
fate to the wind.
massive air
Forward
units.
to
And the next unit that is enabled after the Fleet Beacon gets built is the Carrier,
carrier.
which is the iconic enemy,
Victory awaits.
sorry, the iconic Protoss air unit.
Tassadar be praised. Agreed.
The Carrier
Thou hast Let us proceed.
doesn't attack on its own, but rather it has
Awaiting the call.
up to 8 little interceptors. Interceptors are these
Time is now.
little bee-looking things, and when the carrier attacks, it sends out all these interceptors, and all these interceptors do damage. So each interceptor does 5 damage 2 times, and there's 8 of these interceptors, so the damage definitely racks up. And when you move away, the carriers return home. The interceptors return home.
Bad news?
Now the carrier is a massive unit, so it will receive extra damage from the Tempest.
Storm is brewing. Let us proceed.
Just like that.
We seek
You can see it.
We are poised for victory.
Extra damage for this carrier.
Easy. Awaiting the call. Prepare to
Carriers,
Anak Paru.
they do take time to rebuild these interceptors, and interceptors do cost a little bit of money. So you can see 15 minerals there, and that note. They take 9 seconds each to build. So a valid strategy when going up against carriers is to just try to attack and kill all the interceptors, and once those are dead, the carrier itself is essentially useless. Now the other upgrades from the fleet beacon is Anion Pulse Crystals, which increases Phoenix attack range by 2. By default,
Warp field online.
their range is 5,
For honor. On the wings of justice.
so that's about where you can attack from.
Skies await.
But with the upgrade,
Research
it extends it to
complete.
7, and
I stop. I
then they
am
are
eager
able
to
to
strike.
attack from quite a bit further. And it turns the shots to a nice purple.
Time for battle.
And the final upgrade from the fleet beacon is Flux Veins, which increases the speed and acceleration of the Void Ray. So take a look at the default Void Ray. This is how it moves. With the
Research
upgrade,
complete.
it is quite a bit faster.
Systems at full. Calibrating void lenses. Annihilation commencing.
And the final unit we want to talk about is the Mothership. The Mothership is a very expensive unit. It produces out of the Nexus, and it does require a fleet beacon.
Justice
And
has
the
come.
Mothership cloaks
We
everything
agree.
nearby.
Endi Barakai.
As you can see, all these units with that little bluish hue, that means they are invisible to your opponent unless they have detection.
Directive
And
confirmed.
the Mothership itself
As
doesn't do
all are
massive damage. It does have a few attacks, but attacks pretty slowly.
With purpose.
It's more of a support
By the
unit,
heart of Anta. We proceed.
cloaking its
Rono Hashi. By the heart of iron.
children,
Rono Hashi.
and it also has
Downloading orders.
some abilities that we will take a look at. So first of all, Mass Recall recalls all player units in the target area to the Mothership. Just like the ability from the Nexus, which recalls units to the Nexus, the Mothership
Guide us.
can do the same thing, but it will recall them
Reinforcing Psyweb.
to the Mothership.
I am
And this is what it looks like.
Psyweb established.
We see all those units teleport right there.
Kinala Atum.
That's a very useful harassment tool. You can
Psyweb
navigate your
established.
Mothership to your opponent's base and then recall all your units.
Endi Barakai.
deal some damage, and then use the Nexus recall to get them all out of there.
As all are one.
And the second ability that the mothership has is the Time Warp ability, which creates a bit of a bubble in the target area, which slows down all enemy units and structures within it by 50%.
We agree.
Don't have enough energy for this
We
at the
proceed.
moment, but once we
Directive
generate
confirmed.
enough energy...
Endi Barakai.
Oh, I can actually use that.
Reinforcing Cyweb.
So
Huh?
let's get some
SCV
SCVs here. Let's cast
We
a
await.
Time Warp.
What's going on?
So let's take a look at these
Gotcha.
SCVs. Now outside of the bubble, they move
Uh-huh.
this fast.
Yo.
In the bubble,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
move a lot slower. Let's take a look at that again.
Scared me. Well, butter my biscuit.
Look how slow they
Yes, sir.
are.
Yep.
So the mothership,
Guide us.
very strong support unit.
Down low. Kinala Atum.
It has a lot of HP, 350 shields and HP, so
Reinforcing
takes a bit
Cyweb.
to kill it. It forces your opponent
As
to
all
make a
are
decision.
one.
Do they want to commit to attacking the
Cyweb
mothership,
established.
or would they rather go for the army?
We await.
But again, very expensive unit, takes a long time to build, it costs a lot of supply. So
Direct
usually a pretty good idea to
directed
target down the mothership.
by the heart of iron.
And now just take a look at how slowly it attacks.
In the rear with
And
gear.
that about covers it for all Protoss units and structures. I hope you enjoyed this video, hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time for the Terran edition. Thanks for watching, bye bye.